Welcome to Blevins!
Check out our menu. Choose from a variety of fresh ingredients. Check out our salsa. Watch your burrito being made. Enjoy. Moe's Nose Catering, burritos, tacos, and more.
Welcome to Inside the Set of Over the Boards with Mike Gazzillo. Today, I'm Drew Blevins alongside Chris Lehman, and we'll be doing Wolfpack Sports Television's special of the ACC tournament coming up in Annapolis, Maryland. Chris, first time having you here on the set. Good to have you, man.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Well, let's go ahead and get right to it for NC State. It's been a season to remember. They are taking home their third ACCHL regular season title, albeit this time they really want to bring home that Admirals Cup from Annapolis. What is it going to take for them to be able to do that?
Well, Drew, NC State's just going to have to play 3 complete games. To me, they're the best team in this league this year when they play at their best. So if they're able to play at their best consistently, I see them coming home with that cup.
That's very true. However, for NC State, they've already suffered a laundry list of injuries, and that's very difficult for them to have to get over because it's quality guys such as Joe Panzel, Matt Oakley, Jack McDonald. Andrew Cook is questionable with appendicitis. What in the world are all these variables going to mean for NC State come game time?
Well, you look at the injuries, and the good news about these injuries for NC State is you mentioned these are key guys, but they're not the big names on this team. Joe Panzel, a solid point man, scored his first goal against Duke, so not a lot of offensive production. He is a defenseman, but not one that you're going to miss offensively. So it's not a huge injury. You never want to see a guy go down. It's just one less body, especially when you have to play 3 games in 3 days. But Joe Panzel and Matt Oakley, both big role players on this team, but not huge impact players. So without them, NC State will definitely be a weaker team, but they're not going to be incredibly weaker. It's not like they lost a lot of offensive production like the guys on that red line in Garrett Sunda, Danny Fredenberg, and Alec Engel. That's just not the case. You also have Jack McDonald, who's day-to-day with a concussion. He was supposed to practice last night, and if he felt good, he was going to make the trip and play. So it all depends on how he's doing. But without some of these bodies, it certainly is going to be a little bit harder because you do have to play 3 games in 3 days, which takes a lot of energy.
Oh, without a doubt, it most certainly does. And I think the more important thing when you look at injuries is also the fact a lot of that is centered on the defensive line, and you already lost big man Nate Sprankle to graduation back in December. So for a short bench, NC State having a short bench, it certainly does not work in their favor, but you took the words right out of my mouth when you were going into talking about the red line. This offensive production from Sunda, Fredenberg, and Engel, it continues. It just does not stop. Fredenberg had to be an absolute warrior against the University of North Carolina last week, and now you're coming in, fresh legs, week of rest, fine-tuning everything. That offensive line may be the catalyst and the key to State winning this whole thing.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you there, Drew, because you look at what this team has done, or this line has done. You look specifically at the Duke game where they scored 10 goals of the 12 goals. When they're clicking, NC State finds offense. And one of the things that goaltender Nick Camara said, I believe it was after the Miami loss, is they lose that game 3-2. In low-scoring games, NC State usually does not do very well. So you have to have this line getting production so that you can get that score up and NC State can get goals, get momentum. I think that's what NC State's going to have to do because, as goaltender Nick Camara said, they don't win low-scoring games very often. They need to get the score up.
No, without a doubt, but playing to the best of their advantage, it would seem like NC State needs other guys to step up. You can't center your offense around a single line. And you go back down this list of players who were there last year, and the one senior who keeps sticking out to me is Mackie Heyman. You look at the sizable body, you look at the presence that he has on the ice, really you look what he brings to this team, and the stats haven't been there for him this year. Are you looking for him to be that guy to step up and be the hero if there needs to be one?
I don't think he has to be, Drew, but he definitely can be. As you said, you look at his presence on the ice, he's just a big body. He's intimidating. If he can be successful, that just makes NC State's job that much easier. He's also one of the vocal leaders on the team. He's very talkative. He's very light-hearted with the team. He keeps the team in good spirits. So if he can be successful, that's going to keep him happier. That's going to help keep the team demeanor in the right spot. So I think he definitely could be that catalyst this weekend if he has a good weekend stats-wise.
And the offensive list just keeps going on. You look at guys like Sam Banashevitz, Andrew Kristoff. We've talked about the red line. I mean, for State, there's a lot of offensive weapons there. But shifting back to the defensive line, that's where a majority of the injuries have centered around. That may be the key to State winning. And they had the same problem last year come ACCHL tournament time where they lost Tyler Cloutier. Ended up dressing for the championship game and played a grand total of 3 shifts in the first period. That can't happen for NC State this year. Who do you look to pull together on that defensive line to make it a complete blue line force?
Well, first you have to look at one of the co-captains of this team, Tom Stryker. He's a leader on this team, and I expect him to do that from the point. I think he's going to have a good weekend. I expect him to because he's a senior, and he's going to want to finish his career on a high note, and that's what you see, I think. That's what's going to make this team different than some of the teams that they had last year. I mean, they lost Tyler Cloutier last year. He was the only one who was gone at the end of last season. Nate Sprinkle was a senior, but he didn't graduate until December of this year. So he still played some hockey after last year's ACCHL tournament. But you have 9 seniors on this team, so these guys are all going to want to finish on a high note. I expect to see a lot of hard work, but I think that's going to center around, at least defensively, 2 guys. Tom Stryker, as I said, and then Sean Bly, who's probably the best overall defenseman that NC State has. He's going to have to play well, and he's going to have to find some production as well, because it can't just be up to 1 or 2 offensive lines for NC State. They're going to have to get some production off the back line as well.
Completely agree with you, although I'd like to mention somebody else, a couple of other players actually on that defensive line, freshmen. And that's something that we haven't talked about through the entirety of this season. Chris Wing, number 14, back on that defensive line. He's played at a high level before. He's played in the state of Maryland before with the Carolina Junior Hurricanes going all up and down the East Coast. I think the headiness that he brings, the ability to fire the puck, the ability, truthfully, to make good, crisp breakout passes opening out, trying to get out of the defensive zone, that's key. The other player I think that could be a spark of energy is somebody that we really haven't talked about throughout the entirety of the season, and that's Michael Krenn. And I think what Krenn brings is size, intimidation. The only criticism I have of him is he's young. He takes some penalties that don't need to be taken. But nonetheless, he's a force on that blue line because you're not going to knock him off the puck. He's just that big. And if he's going to be able to keep feeding from the blue line down low on the power play or whatever opportunity he may have to get the puck on the ice, that's where he's going to start to make the difference. And I think that may be key for NC State. Granted, they don't want to lose anybody else. I don't think they're going to have that problem in this tournament. But right there, that defensive line seems to be the crux and the finality of what this tournament may be.
Yes, and I would want to bring up your point there about youth, and that's one of the things you need in a well-rounded team is some youth, and NC State has that. It's one of the reasons that back in 2012 I liked the LA Kings in the Stanley Cup Finals, because you look at their team, they have experience in guys like Justin Williams, you have a good goaltender in Jonathan Quick, and then you have some guys with less experience but hunger like Anze Kopitar. So you have to have a well-rounded team, and if you want to parallel NC State, you have a lot of experience in guys like Alec Engel, Garrett Sunda, Danny Fredenberg, Mackie Heyman, Nick Camaris in net. There's a lot of that experience there. They can help out these young guys. You have a great goaltender, multiple goaltenders that are actually very good, play at a high level. Calvin Stone, who will back up this weekend. You have Eric Murbach, who will play in the Navy game, and then Nick Camaris slotted to play, assuming that NC State gets the wins, the semifinal and the final. So you have the good goaltending, and then you have some youth that can produce. You have Sam Banashevitz. Andrew Kristoff is also very good. Jack McDonald, if he plays, will be essential. And Michael Krenn, like you said, it's just a very well-rounded team, and if they can put all the parts together this weekend, I think it's going to be a good one for them.
And moving right into the men between the pipes, Eric Murbach is slated to play the Navy game. It'll be Camaris throughout the rest of the weekend. That may be key. This will be Murbach's final game in collegiate hockey, playing for NC State against a Navy team that he showed a dazzling performance last year in a 3-1 semifinal effort. Murbach is key to getting this win against Navy. State is naturally a better team. I think where it lies for NC State is getting past the semifinal. How does Camaris respond to a game that he'd probably like to forget against Elon and not having played as much as he did in the first half of the season?
Yeah, and just to talk about Eric Murbach for a minute, that is going to be crucial. And the only thing that concerns me about that is it'll only be his third start. So hasn't been playing that much. And, I mean, he looked good in the games that we've seen him play in, but it is, early in the season, though it's late in the season, it's early in his season because he hasn't played very much. I don't expect that to be a problem because he is experienced, he is a senior, but it could be. If they get past that, that's where I think they'll find more momentum. You have to get that first win. You have to keep going. And once they get past that, they have Nick Camaris in net, who I think everyone on this team believes can stop the puck and keep NC State in games. So I think after that, you'll see a little bit more confidence out of this team. I think you'll see them be more comfortable, and I think you'll see them be more successful.
Now, going into the actual structure of the tournament, it's key to remember that while it is ladder style, that the teams are reseeded after every round. So if State beats Navy, there's a possibility that should an upset happen, they would not go straight to playing the 4 seed. Now, if everybody did win just on paper and you took the chalk, 1, 2, 3, 4, State would be slated to play Elon. However, I'm not a believer in the Phoenix right now. I don't see a rebirth from the ashes as their mascot would suggest. I think it's going to be the North Carolina Tar Heels that are going to win that game. So the best hope for NC State to avoid a matchup with their arch rivals would be an upset win by either George Washington over Georgetown or Wake Forest against the number 2 seed Virginia. How do you see those games playing out?
Well, I think a good point that Nick Camaris made to me last night when I talked to him was that you're now down to the best 8 teams. They're all good enough to beat any of these teams on any given night. So it's hard to say. In terms of my personal opinion, I definitely think NC State should come away with the win against Navy. Elon UNC to me is the most questionable game. If North Carolina shows up and plays as well as they did against NC State last weekend, I expect to see them win just as you do. But Elon also capable of playing pretty strong games. NC State had a close one with them this season. So they can play at a high enough level to beat North Carolina. It just depends on which team shows up. As far as UVA and Wake Forest, a very great team. They can come away with a win in any game if they get in your head. That's what they like to do. They like to be physical, bump you around a little bit after the play, try and get you to take some dumb penalties. If they can get UVA to do that and keep themselves in the game, they'll certainly have a chance. In terms of Georgetown and George Washington, that's another close one. It's one that Nick Camaris personally mentioned to me last night as a possibility for an upset. George Washington, not a bad team. They still have Max Terhar, who will be their captain, who is one of the leaders on that team, who is very skilled, has a great slap shot. He can keep his team in any game. And Georgetown, not quite as good as they have been in the past, but still a strong team. I do expect them to win that game, but I do think it could be close as well.
And the other thing about Georgetown, they're returning a whole lot of key defensemen, including Aiden Neustadtel and Max Capizzi. Those are 2 names that you're going to want to remember this tournament. About the Elon, North Carolina game, it is interesting. It is a battle of the ACCHL co-players of the week from this past week, that being Sam Sereth from Elon and Matt Gelletley from the University of North Carolina. So, Chris, if we go with the predictions that it seems like we're making, and let's say North Carolina does beat Elon, that sets up a legendary 3rd meeting between NC State and North Carolina. How do you see that game, that catalyst, that moment of playing your arch rival when it matters the most? Does that galvanize this team to run the Tar Heels out of the building, and do they carry that momentum into the championship game? Do they get overhyped for North Carolina and lose the title game? How do you see it playing out?
I expect NC State to come out and play strong because I don't think they're happy with the way they played in the 2-2 tie last week. So I expect them to come out strong. Nick Camaris, I expect to play very well in that game. And I expect to see a game very similar to the first meeting of the season, a 6-2 win for NC State. I think NC State will come out wanting to show North Carolina that they're the better team. I think they'll come away with the win there.
It's huge. Chris, final thoughts. Does NC State finally bring the Admirals Cup back to Raleigh?
I think this will finally be their year. I think you have a lot of leadership, a lot of youth that'll be strong as well, and a good netminder, and that's always a recipe for success.
I will keep myself reserved for the time being. I think that if NC State works harder than any team there, that they've got all the skill in the world that they need to bring home an ACC HL title. Chris Lehman, you can check him out on 88.1's WKNC Pulse with the Pack. Chris, thanks so much for being here. Signing off from inside this set, I'm Drew Blevins, reminding you to watch NC State hockey over Wolfpack Sports Television throughout this week, and as always, brought to you by MosCatersRaleigh.com. Have a great weekend. We'll see you from Annapolis. Go Pack.
Welcome to Moe's!
Check out our menu. Choose from a variety of fresh ingredients. Check out our salsa. Watch your burrito being made. Enjoy. Moe's knows catering, burritos, tacos, and more.